So, a quick update on the recent kerfuffle in Cambridge, where a cabal of very privileged feminists came together to do their utmost to shut down a talk about men's rights with some pretty disgusting and underhand tactics. As my earlier video inferred, some childish behaviours do invite simple ridicule, and feminist activism does all too regularly result in comedy gold.
Feels like a competition.
But ultimately, there is a very serious reason why it's important to hold a mirror up to such behaviour, because it can lead to very serious outcomes when it goes unchallenged. And the behaviours documented during and around the talks by J4MB on the 24th of May appear to have led to a very serious outcome indeed, because police are currently investigating allegations of assault occurring as the audience were leaving the lecture theatre. As I mentioned previously, one audience member claims to have been physically assaulted by a group of protesters after he objected to them verbally harassing his 16-year-old son. Well, Mr. Bailey has now lodged a formal statement about the incident, which he shared with J4MB. It reads, "On the 24th of May, I decided to attend the J4MB talk at Cambridge University, Mill Lane, with my 16-year-old son. When I arrived at the venue, a number of protesters were already protesting the event by blocking the entrance to stop delegates from attending. This didn't stop us from attending. During the various talks, the protesters unsuccessfully attempted to disrupt the event by making noise outside of the event. The talk itself covered the history of feminism and the attack on men's rights. On leaving the event, we followed directions from the security staff, which resulted in my son and I walking past a large crowd of protesters. A male protester decided to jump around my son, verbally harassing him, swearing and waving both hands in my son's face whilst making an offensive V symbol. I approached this protester to ask why he thought it was acceptable to harass a minor. The protester decided to harass me instead. I then decided it would be best to walk away, at which point I was surrounded by a group of protesters. Whilst I was surrounded, a liquid was thrown over me. I then tried to push my way out of the crowd as I was now concerned about my safety. The protesters grabbed me from behind and I was restrained by both arms and an arm around my neck. I was kicked and punched multiple times. It was only when a passerby pulled me from the crowd that I was able to escape. During my assault, my son tried to get back to me. It was at this time that another protester challenged Matthew, asking him if he was a hard man. This protester was 6'4" and well built. He pushed his forehead into my son's face. He used his head to push Matthew back. He also used his size to intimidate Matthew. We also saw protesters waving signs saying "Milkshake the misogynists." I take that as an incitement to commit violence, which is exactly what happened to my son and I, simply because we attended a talk. At no point did we express any feelings on the subject of the talk, one way or the other. The matter is currently under police investigation, so I won't comment any further on that specific matter, other than to say that it does appear to have provoked a response from the editorial team currently responsible for Cambridge University's oldest newspaper. Because despite relatively extensive coverage in the run-up to the event, and a milkshake-shaped scoop on the actual day, they have been oddly silent about various revelations that followed in the days after the talk took place. Revelations like the fact that an 11-month-old baby was caught up in the milkshaking incident documented by Varsity. Revelations like the extraordinary footage that revealed the identity of one of the alleged milkshake assailants, who was confirmed as a student currently studying at Pembroke College. Revelations like the testimony that accompanied that footage, which suggested that a Cambridge lecturer and a Varsity photojournalist may even have been co-conspirators in the incident. Revelations like the fact that a famous feminist Cambridge fellow and human rights barrister publicly applauded and stood in solidarity with her fellow feminists' tactics of throwing milkshakes and blocking the entrance to a talk about sex equality in law. And, of course, the revelation that a man and his 16-year-old son were reported to have been assaulted by a group of Cambridge students whilst exiting the campus. Well, almost 2 weeks after the actual talk, and a few hours after Mr. Bailey's statement to the police was made public, Varsity finally jumped into action and even appeared to offer an interesting perspective of their own. I say appeared because Well, here's the email they sent to Mike Buchanan, which he posted on J4MB's site. Dear Mr. Buchanan, I hope this message finds you well. I'm reaching out from Varsity regarding allegations which have been brought to our attention concerning the protest held against the event held by Justice for Men and Boys at the University of Cambridge late last month. If you could please respond to the following claims as soon as possible, I would be very grateful. Number one protester who was stood among a group of protesters through which several attendees decided to walk on their way out of the event, despite allegedly being asked to use a different exit so as to avoid the protesters, claimed that one male attendee became more and more aggressive as he passed through the crowd and eventually tried to punch a male protester standing next to him. Number two, another protester claims to have witnessed a female protester being pushed aggressively against a wall by an attendee of the event, while one claimed to have heard threats of sexual violence being directed towards a female protester. Number three, one protester said that the alleged aggressive targeting and online harassment of students by J4MB supporters prior to the event gave good reason to suspect that they might act with violence towards protesters and women on campus. And number four, our concerns about the well-being and safety of students and staff, which had been repeatedly raised prior to the J4MB event being hosted by the university, proved absolutely founded following the event, said one protester. Please do make a note of to whom your statement should be attributed in your response, and feel free to add any further comments you see fit regarding the events. Thank you in advance for your help. Kind regards, Varsity News Team. Which is interesting, and if true, would be quite a dramatic twist in the story so far, and is suspiciously similar to claims made by the Cambridge Tab in the immediate aftermath of the event, which alleged some sort of antisocial behaviour by J4MB supporters, including spitting. But that's literally all I can report about that, because the article was pulled almost as soon as it was published, and all that remains is a dead link. Anyway, for the record, Mr. Buchanan also posted his reply. Thank you. Please attribute the following to me, though I know from previous exchanges you'll be very selective in what, if anything, you choose to publish. Number one, the claims are nothing more than a continuation of the lies and misrepresentations made against J4MB and its supporters since we announced the talks. If any evidence exists to support any of them, please publish them. Hint: no such evidence exists. Number two, the police recorded an assault of a man and his 16-year-old son who'd attended the event. Our blog piece on the matter can be found here. Number three, Varsity was allegedly complicit in the milkshake incident, given your photographer was there, and on your published piece, the photo was credited to Varsity. The man is in the video following one of our supporters apprehending one of the assailants. Number four, your outlet has been little more than a mouthpiece for lying feminist students and academics from the outset. You have published not one piece of evidence to substantiate any of their allegations against us. You should be utterly ashamed of yourself and for your absence of balanced critical journalism. Our blog pieces on the talks and associated matters can be found here. Number five, I look forward to seeing your editor and photographer in court facing charges in relation to the assaults. Best wishes, Mike Buchanan. So, in summary, 2 weeks ago, Cambridge University hosted a talk about gender equality. Feminist staff and students objected to the talk because it focused on men's rights and included a critical perspective of feminism, and attempted to have the talk cancelled due to concerns about possible violence at the event, and due to as yet unproven allegations of harassment of Cambridge staff and students by J4MB.
I'm in danger!
Which were widely promoted on campus by Varsity in a series of articles, including one opinion piece where one of their own correspondents made a quite serious allegation about online harassment that she claimed to have personally experienced. In the days following the event, it has been reported that Cambridge police are currently investigating 2 incidents of alleged assault against named individuals attending or participating in the talks, one of which was publicly supported by a Cambridge employee and prominent human rights barrister. And dramatic footage has emerged of the apprehension of one of the alleged assailants, along with allegations that a Cambridge lecturer and Varsity photojournalist may have been complicit in one of the assaults. And the Cambridge Varsity News Team have also proactively investigated allegations made by several Cambridge feminists who claim that people attending the talk acted aggressively on their way out and attempted to punch a male feminist and direct threats of sexual violence towards a female feminist. And another protester claimed claimed that the alleged aggressive targeting and online harassment of students by J4MB supporters prior to the event, as reported by Varsity, gave good reason to suspect that they might act with violence towards protesters and women on campus, and that our concerns about the well-being and safety of students and staff, which had been repeatedly raised prior to the J4MB event being hosted by the university and repeatedly covered by Varsity, proved absolutely founded following the events. So, exactly what did the news team eventually report in Friday's edition of Varsity? Well, exactly nada. Which is curious in and of itself. But just as I was putting some final touches to this video, it turns out there's been yet another development. Because while Varsity appear to have passed over on their own exclusive, rival student news outlet The Tab have repeated their previously memory-hold allegations about spitting, along with a whole lot more. Essentially running with the allegations that Varsity declined to take to print, revealing that several anonymous student protesters have released statements exclusively to The Tab, detailing an alleged assault on student protesters by an attendant at the talk held by anti-feminist group J4MB. It's quite a long article, so I'll leave a link in the low bar, but essentially Tab are claiming the following. 3 unnamed protesters have made allegations of harassment and assault immediately after the event. Cambridge security and proctors were present and did not intervene, and the protesters are appalled by representatives of the university's inadequate response to the events. University proctors attending a gathering of upset students in the Students' Union later that evening confirmed that they were shoving, spitting on students, and that the assault was unprovoked. Police also attended this gathering, interviewing students who had been assaulted as well as witnesses. The 3 proctors who had been at the event later confirmed that the attendees had intentionally broken away from the path they were instructed to follow out of the event, and that they had clearly been the aggressors in the incident. Graham Virgo, Senior Pro-Vice Chancellor for Education, has confirmed that the issue would be discussed at the next Prevent Committee meeting, but as of writing has made no attempts to reach out to students affected despite multiple requests from various student union officials. One of the unnamed protesters appears to be one of the individuals involved in the incident reported to police by Mr. Bailey, although Tab make no mention of his statement or the related police investigations. An unnamed Cambridge University spokesperson commented as follows: "We are aware of an incident and we understand the police are looking into it. The university does not condone any act of aggression or violence." Meanwhile, an unnamed spokesperson for Cambridge University Students' Union advised that the events of Friday the 24th of May corroborate the allegations made in the numerous student accounts, claiming that a number of J4MB supporters actively contravened security's instructions to exit the event at a distance from the students outside, instead aggressively confronting those students, and ultimately a number of peaceful student protesters were physically assaulted by an attendee of the J4MB event. Cambridge Student Union and the GU are doing what we can to support students who were put in danger while expressing their right to protest. But the university needs to act to support those students, to explain why students were not listened to before the event, and to make sure this does not happen again. The pattern of right-wing groups gaining publicity by attacking Cambridge students is a serious problem for the university, and they must tackle it head on. So, make of all that what you will. I suspect somehow that this isn't exactly the end of the story, and as there are now apparently 3 police investigations currently ongoing, it's probably best to leave it there for now. But before I go, let me leave you with this thought. If you think that it's over the top or unrealistic to suggest that the demands and actions of over 500 staff, students and alumni of Cambridge University might be a tad problematic, especially in the context of the university's duty to protect all of their staff and students and guests from harassment, including coercive or controlling behaviour such as pressure to subscribe to a particular political opinion or religious belief. Consider the reaction to the news that one candidate for the job of our next Prime Minister had explicitly opted out of the Feminist Club, which was a subject discussed in the latest podcast from Spike.com.
Dominic Raab, one of the dozens of contenders for the Tory leadership, has been pulled up over an old column in which he criticised feminism. Ella, do we all have to call ourselves feminists these days?
If you want to be accepted in polite society, it's probably advisable that you do. Because the minute that you disown the F word, you essentially, it's like a black stain on your political career, and you're not going to get the places that you want to go. The problem with feminism today, I think, and the reason why, let's remember, as we've said previously on this podcast, lots of women, the majority of women, do not subscribe to it. So, I mean, most of us are like Dominic Raab, don't really like it, think it's going kind of down a bit of an extreme route in terms of continuously portraying women as victims for everything. What's the problem? I mean, it just reveals how much of an elitist and professional set contemporary feminists are. They are the kind of the movers and shakers in society, the journalists, the commentators, the politicians who want to use feminism as a means to give their identities a bit more of a shine.
Yeah.
What it means for the average woman out on the street is nothing.
Can't you see it too? There's an elephant in the room.